This is the Welcome to Humanity podcast with thought leader and transformative psychiatrist, Dr. Fred Moss. This show focuses on the betterment of humanity on a global scale. Each episode will leave you enlightened, inspired, and ready to make an impact in your world. Welcome to the show. Welcome to your life. Welcome to humanity. Here's Dr. Fred.
All right. Well, welcome to humanity, listeners. Have I got a treat for you today? It's really amazing. It's an amazing technology that we have here. You know, we've grown and grown so that now there's hundreds or maybe thousands or tens of thousands of podcasts to choose from. And I know I'm really appreciating that you're here today. And I have a promise for you. That promise is what you're about to hear is going to blow you away. So the person that I'm introducing today, the person that I'm interviewing today, the person that I'm having a conversation today, the person who's participating in my podcast today is someone that I met yesterday, folks. No kidding. It's yesterday. I did not know this man before yesterday. I knew of him because I'd been kind of chasing him down on our LinkedIn shares, but I didn't know really who I was talking to. I didn't really know who I was chasing down. And then yesterday, we actually met on a Zoom call. And all I got to tell you is that I just kept on having to pick my jaw up off the floor after I've met some cool people in my life. I've had a really, really blessed life, and I've met thousands of very cool people. And this man is right on the top of that list. So I'm sure you're going to enjoy him as much as I did yesterday. And we're about to learn a little bit more about the magic of this man named Bill Schuffenhauer. Bill Schuffenhauer, thank you so much for being on our podcast today. Really, really great to have you.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Moss. It's such an honor and a pleasure to have met you and connect with you over LinkedIn. And then the conversation that we just had yesterday was just absolutely amazing and engaging and enlightening on every level. And I'm looking forward to, we have so many things in common and so many passions in common to, find other ways to collaborate and make the difference in the world we're looking to do.
Really, really fabulous. Well, super cool. And yeah, so again, it's mutual, of course. And it's an honor to be honored by someone like you. So I would go back with that. You don't have to, we could play that, that fist on the bat game all the way to the top. Yeah, well, it's an honor to be honored by someone who's honorable like you're being honored.
It's like one of those things, I love you more. No, I love you more. No, I love you more.
Before we really get into today's conversation with my good friend, Bill Schuffenhauer, I just want to take a minute to let you know that my book is really up and running. So it's The Creative 8, and it teaches a surprisingly simple method for healing that uses creativity and self-expression. And as a listener to the Welcome to Humanity podcast, I'm going to give you a completely free copy of this book as a deep thank you for listening to the show. And all you have to do is go to welcometohumanity.net/creative. I've used this creative aid methodology with psychiatric patients and coaching clients and even friends for several years with fantastic results. And the method takes less than 5 minutes per day to implement. No kidding, I really know you're going to love it. So head on over to welcometohumanity.net/creative. Download your free copy of the audiobook today. Now, let's get back to our conversation with Bill. Welcome to humanity. All right. Well, Bill, here's the thing. I am going to open this first line. I think my listeners already know. And if they don't, there was zero rehearsal involved here. I have a little bit of a bio here. And I'll soothe you for a moment by reading your bio. But then I'm going to ask you a very large open-ended question. But I'm going to bring forth your bio here by generating it. So Bill Schuffenhauer is a 3-time Olympian and an Olympic silver medalist that has overcome extreme adversity to achieve his dreams as a champion in life. Could not agree more. Now, as a professional speaker, trainer, and global mentor, Bill teaches key concepts to leaders around the world looking to create solutions to drive their organization to the next level. Bill says it is typical for organizations and groups to get stuck in their progress, typically due to the lack of know-how inability to be flexible, or truly thinking outside of the box. Success principles that he has used to achieve such a high level of success are customized to each client's needs, and he provides real-life solutions that they can apply to help educate and inspire their skills to truly benefit their organizations. So thank you for that intro. Thank you for getting my listeners a little up to speed with your thumbnail sketch of yourself. And like I told you right before the call, I am not going to let you stay down here, even at that small of a man. I'm going to let you start talking to people about who you really are, Bill Schuffenhauer. So here's my first question on you. Bill, like, who are you? Like, really, no kidding. Like, no kidding. And you have a few minutes to answer that question. And I appreciate the laugh, but I am actually going man to man at you right now. Like, no kidding, my man. Who are you?
This is one of the things that I've learned to appreciate about you from the first time we met way back yesterday, is that you're straight to the point. And you just throw it out there, and I'm thanking you for that on every level. So, with that question asked, you know what? It is what it is, and I don't mean to make this part sound little, but when I start with this, I want to make sure that people understand and are able to relate that I am no different than anyone else out there.
You are not. You are right.
I just decided to make some different choices in life, and it took me down the path that the universe was meant for me to have. And it is what it is, and I'm extremely thankful. But to kind of throw that out there and draw a picture for people from the listeners, I was a kid who grew up in a very not so good environment. I had a mom and a stepdad that were severely addicted to drugs, on and off the streets here in Salt Lake City, 17 different foster homes, 8 out of garbage cans, involved with gangs, did drugs as a youth, myself with my parents, and watched a lot of the chaos of, my mom, attempting suicide and doing overdoses and being taken away from the system. And so I'm literally that typical, thought that most people get when they say, here's this kid in the system that grew up in a situation, and that would definitely define who I was to the T, because I had an opportunity, and I say opportunity because it helped really grow my life to what it is now. But I had an opportunity as a young kid to live a life that most people would never, ever wish upon themselves or anyone else.
Isn't that great? So let me just hesitate here. I had an opportunity. That's what you see this as, right? Like an opportunity to live a life that no one else has ever, would ever choose for themselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that. I love that.
And, I'm obviously, come from a very strong place of being vulnerable and very open about my life, because if I'm going to do what I want to do in life, and that's come from a place of service and help change the world and help change people's lives and organizations, you have to be very open about it. And, when I say opportunity coming from a background like that, instead of coming from a place of being a victim, I come from a place of what can I learn from the situation? How can I capitalize on these experiences that I'm going through? And all those have helped me really grow into the person that I am today, not only as an athlete, but as a human being.
Yeah.
And again, extremely thankful for those experiences, because nowadays, whether I'm working with a client or working with a team or just having a conversation with a friend, I get to actually speak from firsthand experience. And along with that, having amazing people like you and other people that come from the clinical side, when it comes to a lot of the things that I work with, I get to combine the best of both worlds and just really provide some of the best information, ideas, practices around the world. And so I've been fortunate.
Well, tell us a little bit. So we got it, and there's the 17 foster homes, and it grew up in the system and spit out by the system, and watching your mom, be dragged away, and watching her try to commit suicide, and watching overdoses, and all sorts of other stuff that most of us, just either heard about or never even considered that actually was part of your day-to-day experience in the downtown area of Salt Lake City. And then what happens, Bill? Like you told me a little bit about this yesterday. Like there was wasn't there some sort of an epiphany with your grandmother or something like this you want to bring forth here?
Yeah, one of the times my mom got in trouble for a combination of dealing drugs and prostitution, and I wanted to make sure that I let the listeners know that I love my mom to death, because if it wasn't for the life she provided me, I wouldn't be the man I am today. But one of these times back then, I was going to be taken away either by the state to go to another foster home, my 18th foster home, or my grandma had an opportunity to take me in at this point in time. And thankfully, my grandma was in a position where she could take me in, and I moved north to a much more suburban type of area. Very low rate of crime, not a city, kind of like the white picket fence, if you will. And when I moved up there, it was my first chance I have ever experienced, or the first experience I ever had, when I walk into the school. And, to draw a picture, I walk in with this big giant afro and torn up clothes and just, look like the typical ghetto kid that grows up on the streets, and walked into this school with kids that all had nice clothes, nice haircuts, really well taken care of. And that was my first experience of like, wow, this is different. This environment is very different than what I'm used to. And I recall walking into the doors of Sandridge Junior High in Roy, Utah, and I was like, wow, I actually really like this feeling. I've never felt something like this before. What is that like? And from that point on, I just really enjoyed that excitement and that energy that I felt when I walked into this junior high school. And I was like, how do I get more of this? How do I get more involved with this? How do I, really engage myself with this? And with not knowing how, as most kids that are seventh grade, or back then, we didn't have video games and a lot of social media that we have now, but most kids back then are always worried about playing and things like that. And I was just starting to think, like, what does my life look like 5, 10, 15 years down the road?
Now, how old are you? You're 16 or 17 at this point?
No, I'm only in seventh grade. So I'm
13. 12,
13, 14, 15 years old.
Yeah.
13 years old. So I just got this thought in my mind that, one day I'm going to have to grow up. One day I'm going to have a family of my own. And do I want to provide the same life to my family and my kids that I've currently been exposed to for the rest of my life? And that answer was no. And so I started figuring out, like, what do I got to do to find a different direction and find something different than, what I'm currently experiencing. And, with that opportunity of moving to a new area, putting myself in a different environment, a more healthy environment. I started like just paying attention to the kids around me and started talking to, being more involved and engaged with my teachers and the counselors at the school. And, one day I had really been paying attention to this one kid named Jake Schultz, and I talk about him in my documentary and a lot of my presentations. And he was the kid that everyone disliked. He's part of the student body. He played all the sports. Everyone liked him. He just had this energy about him that was just above and beyond. And I was like, I want to know what that feels like. I want to know what that feels like. And I always joke around in a creepy way. I was following this kid around just to like see what he did every day on a regular basis. And one day I happened to follow him out after school and, wondering what he's doing. And, we go out into the field there behind the junior high, and there's a bunch of other kids, and, they're running and they're jumping over things and they're handing things off to each other and doing all these different things. And I was like, gosh, what is that? And I'm not sure what it is, but this is the first time I turned my very first negative into a positive. And I was like, man, I'm really good at like running from cops and jumping fences and so on and so on. I was like, I think I could do this. And, as you know, I obviously I later discovered that what they were doing was track and field.
All right.
And, it was something that I was like, man, this is really my first opportunity to belong to something, to be involved with something, to feel important to feel engaged and be a part of the team. Obviously, that's the first thing that really came to me. And so I'm like, I'm doing this. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to go do it. And so this is my 8th grade year. And so I go out for the track team, doing really well, having a lot of fun. And first lesson that I learned is that I was having such a great time that I was like, man, if I'm having this fun at track and field and all these tryouts, I'm going to go try out for this thing on baseball because I could relate to baseball because I'd seen it on TV, and I'm going to make the baseball team also. And so one day I don't go to track practice and I go to baseball practice, have a great time. I'm pitching, I'm batting, I'm running bases. Coaches are super excited about me being there. And so the next day I go back to track practice, and the coach asked me like where I was and said, hey, next time just let us know. And, obviously it is what it is. I didn't quite have the discipline that I needed. And unfortunately, or fortunately, had a few choice words for the coach, basically tell him I didn't need to tell him where I was and I can do whatever I want.
Oh, my God.
And that was in the nice way.
Wow.
That wasn't the exact words. And he says, well, you know what? If that's the type of attitude you're going to have, then we don't need somebody like you on the team. And I was like, well, I don't need you. I'm going to go be on the baseball team. And, obviously coaches communicate. And so the next day I go to baseball practice, and baseball coach has a conversation with me based off of what he and the track coach had. And he says, you know what, we just are going to like uninvite you to be a part of the baseball team.
Wow.
And that was the first lesson I had when it, in that first step. And so I had to do a big reevaluation of what it was I was trying to do. And went through that whole summer, like, okay, what is it you're truly trying to accomplish? And
so, Bill, let me just say something about this. I think this story is phenomenal, and I actually have a preview of what's coming up here in your story because there's some massive chapters still to go over in this conversation. Yeah. So I love that story. I had no idea that you got thrown off of both teams and pulled it together. And I really know that something's about to happen here that moves this whole game into the stratosphere. So I invite you to take us there, in the next few minutes. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, it is what it is. I'll be honest. Like, I got down about myself originally over that summer. I ended up getting in trouble, kind of moving back into that space of putting my, surrounding myself with not the most healthy people. And I broke into
grandma kept you in her home though. Yes.
Still with grandma. Yes. And
you were with her the rest of the teenage years?
I was with my grandma all the way up until 9th grade.
Okay.
And then there's like a whole nother story about that one.
Yeah. I'm sure there is. I'm sure. Okay.
So that summer I ended up hanging out with some of my original friends and ended up getting in trouble for breaking into a bike shop and stealing bikes, and got in trouble for that and spent some time in juvenile detention and so on and so on. And again, it was just a slap in the face. And I'm like, okay, what are you really doing? And just really trying to figure out like, okay, this is not conducive to you changing your life and quote unquote, as I talk about a lot, changing your stars to move on.
It sounds like you're really saying, again, you had the opportunity to be thrown off of 2 varsity teams. You had the opportunity to be arrested at stealing bikes. Like, you had the opportunity to go back and hang out with these kids that drew you in the wrong. Like, these are opportunities the way you see them. That's what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah. And again, I don't, obviously I don't encourage people to go back and do some of the things that I did, but, based off of my life, it was opportunities that I learned from. And that's probably
exactly,
that's the key thing. Do you learn from these situations, or do you continue to, make the same mistakes in life? Because as well as I do, we're human beings, and we're given the gift of choice, and we can either choose to live an amazing life, or we could choose to live in the chaos that we create for ourselves.
Right. Exactly.
So eventually I decided that I wanted to create something bigger and better. And I literally reached out to, first and foremost, I reached out to my teachers and said, hey, I understand this is what I did, and I didn't have such a great time. And my grades are, not great. I had all Fs and I think a D- at the time. So I wasn't going to make.
In most settings, that would be called not great. I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
That's the. That doesn't. That's not even average in any setting, Bill. Yeah, I'll give you that. Yeah,
not at all.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't going to make, the track or baseball team either way because of my grades. And I said, I want help. I don't know exactly what it looks like, but I need some help. And
okay,
over the summer of that year, my 8th grade year going into 9th grade, a couple of my teachers agreed to go above and beyond, and they didn't have to do this. And again, I'm super thankful for what they did to take time out for me and helped me start doing after school classes and, just truly working with me and helping me understand like a little bit more work ethic when it comes to classroom and the importance of education. And over that summer, I was able to go from, all F's and D's to eventually when I left junior high with a 3.7 grade point average.
Yeah, of course.
And, that was the first year that I also made the track team. And it was one of the most inspirational times of my life among many. And, enjoyed that I was a part of something. I enjoyed something. And I was a kid who was like, oh man, I'm going to do all the events. So I was doing, the 100-meter, the long jump, the discus, the shot put, the 4x4, the high jump, everything I could possibly do. People were like, this kid, when you're at a track meet, I'm running all over the place and doing,
now, my guess is, Bill, is you weren't just running all of them, you were winning them too. Am I right about that?
I would say I did a pretty good job.
Yeah. You probably ended up in first place pretty often. See some people like average track stars, they can say, so I ran in a lot of events. But this is what I was talking about with you yesterday. You get to actually say, Bill, that you weren't just running in those events, you were dominating those events. And I really want you to get clear about that because that's important for the story and it's consistent with the man that you are. So there's no doubt to me that you were dominating many, if not all of those events. I mean, after all, let's face it.
Yeah. I mean, and that's what kept me and eventually transitioned me into the event I eventually got into that. Yeah, I was over here doing the shot put and taking, top 3 in the shot put. Then I run in the 100 and place top 3 in there. If I was, if it wasn't top 3, I was winning all these events. And when I transitioned from junior high to high school, my 10th grade year, the coaches approached me and they said, hey, we were paying attention to what you did in junior high school and you were all over the place and doing all these events. And, we're interested in having you do this event called the decathlon. And I was like, okay, well, what's the decathlon? And of course, it's a 2-day event. And first day you do the 100 long jump, shot put, high jump 400. Second day you do the 110-meter hurdles, discus, pole vault, javelin 1500. And I was like, okay, sounds like a lot, but I was, kind of used to it. And, and they made it. I remember this comment. They're like, you're the
Bill,
first
you
guy.
get to all my listeners are like, oh yeah, the decathlon. That sounds like that's
and they made this one comment that they're like, you're the first guy to track practice and you're the last guy to leave. And I was like, oh, wait a minute, hold on. I was like, yeah, that's a little bit of a commitment. I'm not quite sure that's like where I want to go.
Right.
And then they made one more, comment. And mind you, like my thought in my head is I just wanted to change my stars. I wanted to be able to do something in life that nobody ever expected me to do. And they said the decathlete is considered one of the best athletes in the world.
Exactly.
Sold.
That's how I was. Right. And that's how I was taught that what that is too. I think most of us were. And you're sold at that moment. Yeah.
I was sold. I didn't care. I didn't care how many events. I didn't care how many practices. I didn't care how long it took. The fact that you put something in my mind, a kid who was trying to change his stars, that I had an opportunity to be one of the best in the world, then I was going to go ahead and do that. And I did. And jumped in head first and just became, another part that I think is truly important is I became a student of the sport.
Exactly.
Same way I became a student of education. They were, I want to say they were both equal, but obviously my education came first because without my education, I wasn't allowed to participate in sports. And I literally just became an education of the decathlon. And my first year of participating in the decathlon as a high schooler, I placed third in the state championships, second in the junior national championships, won several state championships and individual events. So again, I was a kid who went to the state championships, and the first 2 days I competed in decathlon and did really, really well there. And then the next 2 days I competed in open events like the long jump, high jump, 100, 400, 4x4 relay, and placed in the top 3 there as well. And this kind of really helped literally define my life, even to this day, that we always talk about, like, a lot of people like, oh, I'm really good at multitasking. And it's what it is. I just have been able to do that my entire life. But
okay, I want you to, if you can let me just interject.
Yeah, absolutely.
What I want you to get, Bill, and I want my listeners to get, because this is when the jaw starts hitting the ground for us non-decathlete gold medalists. Some of us, if you think about it, some of us haven't actually won Olympic medals before, and even some of us, believe this, if you will, haven't even been to an Olympics. And there's the even larger, like another group that has never won a state championship in anything, and then there's this other group that that really was never sought after by coaches to excel in their life, or to be given the possibility of creating a best athlete in the world as an opportunity. Some of us really have never had that experience. And then there's this other piece, which is a lot of us, while we were in high school, were chasing girls or doing other stupid things. Like, we're really doing stuff that was completely counterproductive, like picking our nose in the corner or other stupid things that we were doing. And many of us didn't even get a 3.7. Imagine that. I'm not kidding. Some of us did not score in the A range in school. And many of us didn't have an opportunity to study our sport. 10 sports on top of this schooling in order to become a champion of the world. There's a lot of us who can't relate directly with that. And so that's when the jaw starts hitting the ground in this conversation. And you should know that even though you can't see my listeners, you can be certain that there's some jaws on the ground in the rooms that are listening to you. So you please continue, but let's put that in context.
Yeah, I'd love to keep that in context. And my reply to that also is that I want to make sure that any of the listeners that are listening out there is don't. And you also help me with this. And it's funny that you help me get enlightened to this too. But I want the listeners to understand that they are also champions in life in some way, shape, or
I can't
form.
say that any louder than the truth. That is what this podcast is about. And this is really about Welcome to Humanity. It really is. And you are such a fine example of all of us. It's true that some of us did. The determination is what I'm talking about here. Not like you're inherently different than all of us. It's in your determination. It's in your declaration. It's in your discipline. It's in your relation with yourself and your purpose. It's in this idea of, I want something and I'm going to pursue it. That makes you an inspiration. But in truth, what we have here is just another ordinary human being named Bill Schuffenhauer. I think that's really true.
Yeah. Again, it is what it is. Obviously, at a young age, I had a vision, I had a goal, and I had a dream, and I wasn't going to allow anything to get in my way of that. And one of the most important parts is that I took action, and I reached out to people in my community and my tribe around me to help me accomplish that goal. And I want to say that because we have so many people out there that have these goals and dreams and ideas. And, I talk about leadership all the time. And the sad reality part about that is we've got 7.5 billion people on the face of the earth. And the statistics show that only 2% of that 7.5 billion people ever achieve their dreams. And it's because they don't take any actions. And so,
exactly.
I obviously had a big, massive goal and a big, massive dream, and was going to go for it because I wanted to eventually look back, in which I have an opportunity to do now, and see my name and the name that my kids are given and their kids and my grandkids and so on down the line can always look back and say, oh, Schuffenhauer, we are part of that Olympic family, and it's in the history
Super
books.
Cool. So let's jump right here to when does the Olympics get on the radar, and what is it about, what happens before 2000? Like when did people approach you, or when do you start looking at, holy cow, this could be where, this could be the direction I'm really next for me.
So I had a great career in high school. Interesting enough, I was not planning to go to college after high school. But then my coaches were like, well, you could have all your school paid for, and, this is your next step into a great career, and you can basically get paid to keep running. And I was like, okay, well, that's a no-brainer. So let's keep doing that. And eventually attended a local university here, even though I had every opportunity and every scholarship to go to any school, including Ivy League schools in the United States. But I decided to stay home and had a pretty decent career throughout college doing the decathlon. Eventually, won several championships in college and qualified for every NCAA championships. And the goal post-college, there wasn't really a goal. I was going to be done. And a lot of people don't even know that. But my coaches are like, oh my gosh, again, the decathlon and the decathletes considered one of the best athletes in the world. But if you go to the Olympics, and in reality, this was introduced during college as well. More importantly, towards the end of my career in college, if you go to the Olympics, not only are you considered one of the best athletes in the world, but you will ever solidify your name into the history books, and kind of which we talked about a moment ago. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is something I got to do. Mm-hmm. And this was also one of the first times I realized how important it was to surround yourself with some of the very best people, in that case for me, athletes and coaches, to help you achieve bigger and better. And so at the time, this is 1995.
I want to interrupt one thing here, which is that you also said early, I think you're saying something slightly larger than what you just said, which is the influence of the people around you really affects your performance. Because earlier in this conversation, you talked about when left in ninth grade, you fell back to the crew that wasn't working so well. And then your life, you became that of a child who had fallen back to the crew that had not, you were influenced by negative just as easily as you could be influenced by athletes and coaches and people who have your highest, the highest intentions for you. Yeah.
And with that said too, something I learned way later in life, from one of my mentors, Dan Clark, who's a world-renowned motivational speaker and a contributing author for all the Soup for Your Soul books. He told me, you become the sum of the 7 people you hang around the most. And so, if you're going to hang around, 7 gangsters, you're going to become a gangster.
Exactly.
If you hang around 7, doctors, you're going to find an interest in becoming a doctor or serving in some capacity in that field.
Exactly.
So, I had an idea that I was like, okay, then I'm going to go to the Olympics. If I can be like one of the best athletes in the world, but also then go to the Olympics and literally solidify myself and truly, truly change my stars and go from being this kid who was never ever expected to amount to anything. Luckily, if I even made it to the age of 16, to become an Olympic athlete, represent the United States of America on an international level, then I'm going to go for it. And so we prepared to, at that point in time, post-college, we didn't have social media and all that stuff. And I was like, well, I'm going to find the very, very best in the world. And at the time, during 1995 and 96, it was the Dave Johnson and Dan O'Brien show, 2 of the very best decathletes in the world. And if some of the listeners on there remember the Reebok commercials of the 2 back in the day. So I wrote a letter to Dan O'Brien and his coach in Moscow, Idaho. Put it in the mail, licked a stamp like we did old school back then, and put it in the mail and waited for a response. Didn't have any expectation that I would get one. And several weeks later, I get I almost said email, but a letter, a letter in the mail from, the coach up at Moscow, Idaho, who was the head coach at the University of Idaho at the time, and said, "Hey, we would love to have you. Let us know when you get here, and we'll make arrangements to get you settled." And so I bought a Greyhound bus ticket and jumped on a Greyhound bus from Salt Lake City, Utah to Moscow, Idaho, which was one of the worst experiences of my life as well, in the middle of the winter. But went up there and, had a really good time being around some of the best athletes in the world, and just learned a lot. But eventually, the universe just had it for me to come back and train with my coaches here prior to the 2000 Sydney Games. And that first year, getting ready for the 2000 Sydney Games, I do my first decathlon early point in the year, scored just over 8,000 points, happened to be the 51st American to ever score over 8,000 points in history, and qualified for Olympic trials. At that point in time, I was currently ranked number 1 in the world. Knew that wasn't going to last because it was early on in the season, and eventually did another decathlon a few months later, which still kept me in the top 5 in the world, qualified for Olympic trials. And this was the year that everyone around me, my coaches, my family, my friends were like, "You've finally done it. You're going to change your stars. You're going to go to the Olympics." And, we're all excited. We're on this high, just, wow, this is going to finally happen. And we decide that 2 weeks before Olympic trials, we're going to go down to a local university here, Brigham Young University, and just do a kind of a warm-up meet, just to kind of keep the muscles fresh and engaged. And so we go down and of course, the first event of the decathlon is 100 meters. We're not even worried about time. We're not worried about any of that stuff because we'd qualified already. And so run the 100 meters. And then next event is the long jump. And it had been raining that morning. And during the long jump, my very first jump, I go to, I'm running down the runway. I go to jump. My heel hits the track. The track's wet, so my heel slides. My foot rotates. Eventually, as my foot plants, my spikes catch the board. All the pressure and the speed from running, down the track rotates my ankle, and basically I blow my ankle out, land face first in the sand, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, what just happened? And the coaches and myself, we start going into panic mode, and we're like, oh my gosh, what do we do? What do we do? So they marked my jump, which wasn't, anything to get excited about. But the issue is, and this is, one of the learning lessons, is we just went into panic mode. We didn't have to continue the event because I'd already qualified for Olympic trials. But because we went into panic mode, we were like, okay, what do we do next? So we get the trainer over. They shoot my ankle up with numbing agent. They basically wrap a cast on my ankle, and we go and get ready for the next event, which is a shot put. Barely get a mark in the shot put. Next event after the shot put is the high jump. And of course, I jump off the same leg that I just blew up in the long jump. And we're trying to figure out, okay, we got to change our angle. We got to do this. We got to go do this. And, make a long story short, I did all 3 attempts and just blew through the bar. I didn't even get a height. And on that third one, I just remember laying on the high jump pits and the tears just start falling down my face because I knew I'd done so much damage to that ankle. I could barely walk on it. And after I'm done laying there on the pads and just looking up at the sky, just, eyes blurry because the tears are running and knowing that it's over with, I get up and my coach comes up to me and he's like, "Hey, what's going on? And, how do you feel?" And I said I was done. I one of the first times in my life and my career, I had given up myself, and I was like, the dream is over with. And I just I left all my stuff there on the track, grabbed basically just my backpack and went home and gave up. And lo and behold, the universe sometimes is very kind. And, after several weeks of kind of falling into that depression.
Let me interject for a second, Bill. I just want to thank you for the vividness of that share. I think each and every one of us was lying with you on that bar in the sand, and your expression and capacity to articulate what that experience must be like, completing the shot put and then looking, high jump, and got to change, got to do something, got to do it, got three no's, and then boom. It's just like really beautiful how you made that so visible. The experiential nature of your description hit me and all of my listeners and anyone who ever hears this story very hard. And you should know that you succeeded in putting us lying down, looking at the sky and crying with you. So I want you to get that.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you very, very much. And so, several weeks later, a random friend comes to me and said, "Hey, have you ever thought about going to the Olympics here in Salt Lake City?"
And that's just unbelievable, right? That's just unbelievable.
Yeah. I mean, I think about it still today, even while I'm telling you this. I'm like, how crazy and weird is this, right? And I'm like, what are you talking about? The Olympics are in Sydney, not Salt Lake City. They're like, no, the Winter Olympics here in Salt Lake City, the 2002 Winter Olympics.
I'm like, again, an interjection here is when I heard, and really, I've been to Olympic Village. I was just there about 4 months ago. I went to Park City at the film festival. And, so I've been to the Village, and it's real. But, the thing is that when they picked Salt Lake City back in the day, so that was like 18 years ago. So I'm not young, I'm in my 40s. I'm thinking, I'm sorry, did you say Salt Lake City?
Right?
I was like, now after hearing your story, I get exactly why they picked Salt Lake City. And the reason they picked Salt Lake City is because the universe is so kind, and it was meant that you could be you over there in Salt Lake City. So please continue.
Yeah. And so I'm still trying to figure out what are you talking about? Salt Lake City? No, the Olympics were in Sydney. And they're like, no, the Winter Olympics. And I'm like, a big, what are you talking about? I've never skied. I don't snowboard. I certainly don't do any figure skating. What are you you're crazy. And they're like, no, there's this event called bobsled. And
oh my
guys
God.
like you that are track and field speedsters and, NFL, running backs are perfect for the sport. They've had Edwin Moses and several other high level athletes participate in the sport of bobsled. And I was like, okay, I don't even know what this is about. And they're like, okay, we're going to show you some videos. And of course, it is what it is. The first time I've, was open to the idea or introduced to the sport of bobsled, it was the movie Cool Runnings with the Jamaican bobsled team.
We talked about that yesterday.
We did. And so, of course, I was like, kind of sparks my interest. I love, fast, powerful, and speed. And it wasn't until I had an opportunity to watch the U.S. team competing over in St. Moritz, Switzerland on a video. And I was like, yeah, that is really, really cool. And so my interest is definitely sparked, right? And event, the reality is I wanted to change my stars. I wanted to become an Olympian. And it didn't matter if it was track and field, bobsled, badminton, whatever. Yeah. And we started getting into the conversation with my coaches and my family, let's think about this. What if we could actually create this story? What if we could actually design your life, create your life by design? And we could go to the Olympics in Salt Lake City, the same city and state where you grew up eating out of garbage cans. And now we're getting you to the Olympics. And I was like, man, that's a great idea. But, those Olympics are only a year and 3 months away. And I've never been, I know that athletes spend their lifetime trying to get to the Olympics in their sport. And I'm stepping in out of nowhere. It's kind of a crazy idea. But in the back of my mind was still, what if? What if we actually could write this story exactly like that? And so we gave it a very short thought. And I was like, you know what? All I have to do is I'm going to simplify all this. I'm going to basically take everything that I put into the sport of track and field. I'm going to pick it up out of that bucket. I'm going to dump it into this new bobsled bucket, and I'm just going to run with it. And, if we can write the story, we can write the story. And so we did. We all were in agreement. And again, I had to become a student of the sport of bobsleigh and learn as much as I could, but still keep the focus that I had of becoming an Olympic athlete. And a year and 3 months later, I find myself making the Olympic team here in Salt Lake City and winning the first Olympic medal for the U.S. in over 46 years.
All right. So, look. So you're so listeners, if the listeners want, you can pull your jaw up off the floor again and give it a try, because there's more coming. So please leave it loose. There's no reason to tie it up or anything. So what we got here is we got you. Now, what's your heritage?
Spanish, Puerto Rican, Italian. Little of this, a little of that. Mm-hmm. But always grown up in Salt Lake City, Utah.
So this is your hometown, and am I hearing that when your friend said, "Have you ever thought about going to the Olympics in Salt Lake City?" You probably didn't even know that Salt Lake City had been picked for the 2002 Olympics. Was that right? Or maybe you heard it?
Yeah, no, not only that, I didn't even know there was such thing as Winter Olympics.
There you go. That's what I'm talking about. That's exactly what I'm talking about. So and as far as bobsled, the bobsled might as well have been something like gladiator sport or something, something like you didn't know beans about bobsled at all.
Yeah, I knew nothing at all about the sport, let alone Winter Olympic sports.
All right. So you end up, isn't there something about another piece of universal luck? Like you actually weren't on a team, you were a pusher, or what? You tried to explain that to me yesterday.
Yeah, correct. So originally when I was chosen to be a part of the 2002 Olympic bobsled team, I was originally picked by Team USA 1 based off of what I was doing on Team USA 5 as just an alternate. And, they said, hey, we want, we've been watching you and we think you're a phenomenal athlete. We think you'd be a really good fit for our team, at least as an alternate. And because we're, the top ranked team in the world and USA 1, we have an opportunity to bring on any alternate we want. And of course I was like, yeah, I'm definitely interested. And so when we decided to move forward with that, my driver, Todd Hayes, at the time, and the coaches were like, okay, you realize that because you're new to the sport, a lot of people are going to be really upset about this decision we made. So to make sure that we hush the talk in the bobsled world, we're going to actually have you compete on the 4-man team for Team USA trials, in which they didn't even have to compete on. So they were already going to make the Olympic team. They were already picked because they were top ranked in the world, but they're like, we want to make sure that everybody knows that we made the right decision. So I joined the team and compete in the U.S. trials, and we just literally, in the kindest way, you kind of know my personality, we destroy everybody. And just put up the
thank you for simply acknowledging that.
And so we put up the numbers, and it was, we actually had done better with me on the sled than the original team. Mm-hmm. So that solidified my spot on the team as an alternate. Mm-hmm. And we go throughout the rest of the season, getting close up to the Olympic Games in 2002. And one of the teammates, unfortunately, tested positive for a banned substance, which he did later prove he was not guilty of. But because of that, he ended up getting pulled off the Olympic team. So I then moved in his position as the alternate and had an opportunity, like I said, to compete in the Olympic Games. And I found out about it 2 weeks before the actual Olympic Games, when we were just getting ready in San Diego at the Olympic Training Center. And, again, it's this.
You found out you were actually going to be in the sled less than 2 weeks before the Olympic Games.
2 weeks before the Olympic Games.
Oh, my God.
And
all right, folks, I got it. Your chin's down there. I got it. I got it. It's no problem. I warned you. I warned you. Just you can go ahead and lift it up. But there is more coming, so please don't tie it up to your jaw. Everything's going to be fine.
And so and so I ended up being on the team, and at the same time, the world of media is announcing that my teammate tested positive for a banned substance. But at the same time, the world of media is also talking about this kid who grew up on the streets of Salt Lake City, has made the Olympic team, is going to compete here in the same hometown that he grew up, homeless, on the Olympic team. And so it was both a combination of the most amazing time of your life, but also a hard time because, that teammate was one of my teammates, one of my best friends. But you know what? I am not going to argue with the universe.
You know what? And we still don't know. Maybe we still don't know what the value was of all of those stories. We never know. And like you might be able to clip on the same idea of what you've done a few times in this talk that we pointed to, this idea that it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity, even though it doesn't look like that all the time, that it's a major opportunity that took place for that gentleman. Yeah. Yeah,
absolutely. And I'm really big and even on my Instagram homepage, it says, when opportunity knocks, always open the door. You don't have to walk through the door, but you might as well at least see what that opportunity is and recognize it. So that's what I've always done all my life. And obviously it was a great opportunity for me to create this story. And, we then started reflecting back on the conversation we had a year and 3 months ago. Like, what if we actually made the story happen? And now we're actually living it. So we had this idea, we had this intention, and we made it happen.
All right.
Yeah.
So that's super cool. So, and what, you say you medaled, but, most people think that if you say that, you're probably implying that you got in on the backside of a bronze, but that isn't it at all, is it?
No.
What's the real truth about this medal, Schuffenhauer? It's like, if you're going to say medal, like we were talking about elephant yesterday, you got to talk about, like, what is your medal? What was your medal? What color?
Yeah, it was a silver medal.
Yeah. And how far were you from a gold medal, Bill?
15/100ths of a second. And that's after a combination of 4 runs over 2 days. Now, mind you, that's going down a track that's a mile long, doing 87, 88 miles per hour. So
88 miles an hour, right? It's 88 miles an hour.
So we actually, I've measured it, and the measurement over 4 runs on a mile long track doing 88 plus miles per hour is literally less than a foot difference.
And that's how far you were from being a gold medalist. And what country did win?
Germany.
Germany won. Okay. All right. Well, there's another piece here for my listeners who are now getting used to their jaw smacking off the bottom of the ground. So here we go. We got another piece, because one place you see, Bill likes to act a little bit. I don't know how I would be if I was him, but Bill tends to understate himself. In it's like, Bill, if you're gonna play like an elephant, like a woolly mammoth, then you gotta just like own your woolly mammoth. So here's what we got. Bill, the introduction already revealed that this isn't the only Olympics that you competed in. And so that, Olympics, they happen every 4 years, right? And you got a busted ankle that you could barely walk with it less than 2 years prior to this. And now you're on this Olympic team. But I'm guessing something must have happened for you over the next 8 years to actually hit up 2 more Olympics. Yes?
Yeah, absolutely. My track coach, Dan Walker, back in college, who was my multi-event coach, used to always tell me that any fool can do it once. And I remember the first time he said that, I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, oh, any fool could accomplish something at least once in their life. But if you want to truly be successful, why don't you duplicate it and do it again? Mm-hmm. And that really resonated with me after I made my first Olympics. And I was like, okay, then I'm going to train for another Olympics. And then I can not only prove to myself, but my coach, who I've spent hours and hours and hours and hours and hours with training, that I could do this one more time. And so I trained for the 2006 Olympic Games in Torino, Italy, made that team. And I think we ended up, oh, good grief, 6th and 13th in 2-man and 4-man. And then decided after that, I actually retired because I thought I was done, and took some time out I didn't take time out. I was done.
So wait a second. You were on the 2-man team. You were on the 2-man team in Italy. Were you on the 2-man team also in 2002?
No, I was just on the 4-man team. in
All right. So
2002.
because you didn't mention that to me, that you were actually were you on the only USA 2-man team in Torino, or was there a couple teams?
There were a couple of teams.
Okay, good. All right. So you're on the 2-man team and the 4-man team, 6th and 13th in Torino, and you quit. But again, so that's the second Olympics. A lot of us haven't even been to 2 Olympics. So, and then Bill, you quit, but there's another Olympics coming. So what the heck happened here?
So yeah, after I retired from the 2006 Olympics, I thought I was done. Went to work for.
You are hilarious. Just to let you know. Go ahead.
Hey,
go ahead.
I'm glad I can add some comedy to our conversations, because there's many more to come with you and I. But I went to work for an amazing company, Wells Fargo at the time, for 2 years, and thought that was going to be my career. And I found myself, because I part of my job was to go to 64 different banks and represent my product for the bank. But I always found myself, every time I drove by a track, I was like, oh man, something was like this yelling at me to go do a workout on the track. And so one day I did, and it actually happened to be raining. And I was like, I got to be out there. I don't know why, but I got to be out there. And so I went and did just a regular workout, and I was like, I got to do this again. I don't want to look back and say I shoulda, coulda, woulda. I want to be able to retire from the sport knowing that I put everything out there on the line, and then I retired when I wanted to, not when everyone else thought I wanted to. And so this was right before 2008, as we all know. That was the 2008 economy crash on a big level, but I didn't know it at the time. And so started to prepare myself to make the 2010 Olympic Games in Vancouver. And everything was going really well. I'd solicited all my own sponsorships and people that are big into financial, and that's important to them. I solidified about $250,000 in sponsorships at that point in time. So I knew that my family and everything else was going to be taken care of.
So that's not so bad. Not so bad for a guy who lived on the on the middle wrong side of the tracks for 17 foster homes, and like never ever had seen the freedom that even grandma was able to show him. This idea of acquiring 64 banks worth of $250,000 and for something that matters to you is pretty incredible. Pretty incredible to be done in one lifetime.
Yeah. And so, I start doing the workouts, and I'm, getting my mindset, because I knew that, I'd done 2 Olympics. And so I knew mentally and physically what it took. And that year, obviously, I love that you and I can laugh about this fun stuff.
God, oh my!
And I'm getting ready.
So, I'd been Olympian before. I've been there, done that. In fact, I'd already duplicated it. So I thought, what's the third time?
Yeah, I one of the things you'll get to learn a lot about me, and it's something that I work with all my clients, is that as human beings, and I know you know this, we tend to make things more complicated than they need to be.
Right.
And so throughout my career, I found success in simplifying things. And that's what's really helped lead to a lot of the successes I've had, both personally in business and so on and so on. And so, so I decided I was going to do this next Olympics. And, that year prior to the Olympic Games, obviously, the economy had crashed and we started experiencing issues. And last minute,
so you're thinking 2008 now, track and field is what you're thinking right at this. Am I right about this?
No. I'm still doing bobsled. So
okay, so you're thinking 2010 bobsled is still
correct.
Right?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead. Yeah.
And so, obviously 2008 is when the beginning of the economy crashed.
Right.
And we're like, okay, we're going to do it anyways, but didn't realize that it would truly affect everyone. And, that year prior to the Olympics, 2009, 2010, all the sponsors, as kindly as they could, and I respect their decision, all pulled out. So I lost all $250,000 in sponsorship money. Ended up losing our house. I lost my car, but we're literally less than a year out from the Olympics. And I was like, well, it is what it is. I can't do anything about the economy. It's crashed. But I'm going to move forward with this goal and this Olympic dream. And so again, I wasn't going to allow anything outside of that world to stop me from accomplishing that. And so we push on and eventually make the 2010 Olympic Games in Vancouver for my third Olympics.
So there you were in Vancouver, Canada. Yes,
absolutely. Beautiful place. And
what's that?
Beautiful place. Vancouver's just a beautiful place. Yeah.
I had been there in 1986 when Vancouver, I think, hosted they hosted the World Fair. So that's when they got, some of the early stuff going on. It wasn't the World's Fair. It was called something else. Anyways. Yeah, that's a beautiful place. So there you were, and boom. How'd you do there?
Ended up doing, I think 14th place. But, for me, it wasn't about, that was my first Olympics. It wasn't about like where I finished. It was all about the Olympic experience and enjoying that.
Thank you. It's almost like you got to expand yourself to see things for what they were from a broader perspective.
Yeah. And I'm not sure how much of this conversation, but maybe this will lead into the next part of our conversation for the listeners. I just took it upon myself to really network at a high level to potentially set myself up for post-Olympics and my career after that. And I'd already been doing motivational speaking at that time. And so I was rubbing shoulders with all of the major Olympic sponsors, from Swatch to Procter & Gamble to Ralph Lauren. I actually had David Lauren, who was in charge of the Olympics, call in to have me come to events with them, Hilton hotels, all the way to the point where our marketing team for the U.S. Olympic Committee is like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "What are you talking about?" They're like, "Everybody's asking you to come to their events because you're just out there making it happen." And if I can, I'm going to transition us into this next part, which led to the issues I had post Olympics, if that's okay with you.
Well, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to pull an executive decision here. I know a little bit about this next part, and I deeply respect this next part, as we talked about yesterday, deeply, maybe even in some ways deeper than the story that you've already told. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to relieve us of this next part, but commit as of today, as of now, to Bill Schuffenhauer Part 2 as far as a podcast. Because I think at this space, we're at a really good space to look at okay, this is the deal, listeners. You get what I'm saying? This is like, there he is. This is what this man has gone through. And you hear his ordinariness, or his well, I wouldn't say ordinary, but you hear his basic humanity, your basic humanity, Bill, and you hear that in the determination and in the commitment and in the declaration and in the actions and, the trials and tribulations and the, circumstances and the hurdles, to the real hurdles, and then, hurdles and then hurdle. Like, I get to use that word finally for like the first time in my life for what it really is. Wow, how exciting that is. I've never used that word accurately in my life until just now. Like, so great. And really, really getting this kid, right? Getting this child who was living in places that we don't even think about, a product of the system. And this isn't about being given a golden spoon. This is not about that. This is about you doing human things to get what it is you're committed to, Bill. And it's extraordinary. And so we're going to taper this one off as podcast 1 of 2. And I've not done that before, but we can do that. And then so that will leave listeners ready to get like what happens next. And folks, please tune in to podcast number 2 because there's plenty, and go ahead and wear a pad on your chin because there's plenty of more coming here about who this guy has been. Bill, how old are you?
I am 46, rolling up on 47 here shortly.
Yeah, he's 47. So that's, this is a guy who has put this life together. And I'm just hoping that my listeners, your listeners, anyone else listening here can sort of get that if you like, when people are saying, what are you doing? How come Dave Loran is chasing? What do you mean? How did you get on every event? Like there's so much, how did you get here? And your answer could be almost something, Bill, as simple as, cause that's what I said.
Yeah. It's one of the things, and I agree with you, like part 2, I think is even going to be more impactful for the listeners.
It's more stunning in some ways. Yeah,
because
it really is.
It actually helps everyone from the average person to the top level in the world really relate to, because like you said, it's hard to relate to the Olympic story, but it's not hard to relate to
this next story. 2. That's right.
But we had this discussion, I think, a little bit yesterday that we have a choice in life, and it really is that simple. We either can lead a life by design, and we can build our architecture by design, or we build it by default. And it is, and I've been guilty of leading a life by default, and that's okay. But I've learned how to declutter that and deconstruct that to rebuild a life by design. So I'm actually looking forward to part 2.
Yeah, me too. And folks, he's not kidding, of course. And this is the part 2 has some dramatic and inspiring components that actually exceed, believe it or not, maybe it doesn't exceed, but it's equivalent to some of the stuff that he's already reported, that he's already told us about in this interview. So, Bill, let's taper this one down. Let's schedule this. You have my commitment, as do my listeners, to have this done shortly rather than long. We'll get it done maybe even early next week. And I'll pass that on to Ryan, our co-producer here. That's what we're going to do.
Absolutely.
All right. Wow. Okay, cool. So here it is. So let's sign off with. So you're in good shape. Let's just get a 2-minute view of like let's see if I want to do this. Okay, let me just say with an exclamation point that Bill's in very good shape right now. Am I right about that, Bill?
I am in the if you want to call it the zone of life, I am definitely there. And
in the zone of life. Absolutely. Yeah. All right, so I want my listeners to get that rather than thinking that somehow, I'm interviewing you out of like, Utah prison or something. So we got to get that isn't where we are. So
I'm at home. Had an absolutely amazing day today, as I do every single day because I create it, and I'm really excited for this part 2. It's as you know, it's very new for me because I very recently came out and talked about it. But it's something that I am extremely passionate about and look forward to having this conversation again.
All right. Well, let's get that done. We'll get that done shortly. It's super cool. All right, listeners, how fun was that? And really, really. So, Bill, they're going to want it on both parts, but someone wants to follow you. Someone wants to know more about you. Someone wants to read more about you. Someone wants to just like, maybe interact with you or find out how you can be a speaker or a mentor or just be on their radar. How might someone actually get a hold of you?
Yeah, the easiest way, obviously, I have several opportunities to be on social media, on Facebook. I have a website, olympianspeaks.com. You can feel free to email at info@olympianspeaks.com. And I'm an open book, and I honestly, 1 million people could respond to me tomorrow, and I will make an effort to try and respond to every million that reach out to me. So anybody can respond to 1 million once, Bill. I might be a little tired after that, but I will definitely give my best effort.
Which reminds me, that third time, it seems like you put it in the face of the guy who already knew that twice makes you something. Like the third time is like, yeah, you think there's people who can do it twice. I get that. Like any fool can do it once. It takes a champ to do it twice. What?
It was, the third time was it was more about me. It was more about me fulfilling my dream.
Exactly.
And stepping away when I wanted to on my terms.
Yeah, it's something. There's something so remarkably sweet about that. I totally get it. Totally. All right, Bill, we'll talk to you next week. We'll get this thing scheduled. Listeners, I hope you enjoyed this. Remember, it's really true that Bill is just a human being. It really is. You might really be able to get, the guy's got some magic skills inside of his physical body. That's true. But you also have magical skills inside of who you are. Like, no kidding, gifts that are outrageous. That, Bill, isn't this like kind of the point? Like in the world of creating a future that actually works for you rather than a future of the default, you get to have a life of magic and a life of, a created life of miracles is available seemingly for each and every one of us.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I always tell people, and I'm excited that I've actually come up with my own quote, but I like to leave them with this, that dreams are only dreams until we take the actions to ignite them.
Awesome. With that, listeners, dreams are only dreams until we take an action to ignite them. I'm going to bid adieu. I have Bill Schuffenhauer with me today, and part 2 is coming around the corner, so you'll get that next week. Thank you for joining us. Stay tuned for part 2 or click on to part 2 to hear more. Bill, we'll talk soon. I love you, man. You're just amazing. Thank you.
I love you too. And thank you. And thank you to all the listeners, because it's, again, this is a passion of mine. And if there's anything I can do to help make this world a better place based off of my experience, that's what I'm going to do.
Awesome. Terrific. All right, listeners, welcome to humanity. Thank you again. Thank you for joining. Catch you on the flip side. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye for now. Hey, listeners, thank you so much for tuning in today. Isn't that just wonderful? It's so great to talk to fascinating people like Bill Schuffenhauer. Wow, the man just has been through so much. And here we are just at the end of part 1 of what this guy is really up to. He's already like one of, if not the most inspiring man I've ever met. Except each and every person I meet on these podcasts is fascinating. So I hope that you're enjoying it. And maybe as you were listening, you thought of a person or maybe a few people who really, really have to hear this episode. So go ahead and reach out to them right now and invite them to listen and to subscribe to the Welcome to Humanity podcast. And speaking of subscribing, well, I'd like to ask you to do a small favor as well. Maybe you could just take a moment and hit the subscribe button on your podcast player. And that way, I'll be able to send you the latest episodes as they become available. Secondly, if you appreciate what we're doing here, could you just take a few minutes and leave a review on Apple Podcasts? Subscribes and reviews are the 2 major ways that we reach more listeners with the Welcome to Humanity podcast. And if these conversations are moving for you, please pay it forward by subscribing and leaving a review. I'd be truly grateful for your support. Also, if you'd like to catch up on past episodes, head on over to welcometohumanity.net/podcast. So until next time, this is Dr. Fred, and this has been another wonderful edition of the Welcome to Humanity podcast. Welcome to your life. Welcome to humanity. Thank you for listening.